Before you close this video, before you scroll away and pretend you did not hear this, I need to say 4 words to you, and I need you to actually sit with them instead of rushing past them the way you rush past everything else that makes you uncomfortable. I know what you did. Not the version of it you have explained away to your friends. Not the version you have quietly rewritten in your own memory until it felt easier to carry. The real version, the one you have never said out loud to another living person. Stay until the end of this video, because what I'm about to tell you is not the warning you think it is. And if you leave in the next 10 seconds, you may spend a very long time wishing you had stayed for the rest of it. You may be tempted right now to assume this message was simply written broadly enough to feel personal to anyone listening, the way certain messages always seem to fit whoever happens to be reading them. I understand that skepticism, and I would have the same skepticism in your position. But consider, just for a moment, what led you to click on this specific video tonight, out of every other video you could have chosen instead. Consider what you were feeling in the minutes before you found it. What thought had been quietly circling in your mind? What name or memory had surfaced uninvited earlier today? These things are rarely as random as they feel in the moment, and by the end of this video, I think you will understand exactly why that matters. Everyone watching this right now is carrying something, a decision made in anger that can never fully be undone. A silence kept when the truth was owed to someone who trusted you. A door quietly closed on a person who deserved better than the way you left. A version of yourself you buried so deep that even you have almost convinced yourself it was never really you. You have told yourself for years that nobody knows, that the secret is safe, locked away where it can never surface, where it can never cost you the reputation you have spent so long building, the relationships you have spent so long protecting. Tonight, I am telling you plainly, it was never hidden the way you believed it was, and that truth, the one you're about to hear in full, is going to break your heart before it does something far more important. It is going to set you free. Here is the first truth of this warning, and it is heavier than most people are ready to carry. What you did was never a secret from the only witness that ever truly mattered. Every quiet lie, every private cruelty, every moment you told yourself nobody would ever know, was seen in full, in real time, by the one presence that has never once looked away from you, not even in your worst moment, not even in the moment you are most ashamed of right now as you listen to these words. For years you may have imagined this fact as a threat, a reason to feel hunted, a reason to brace yourself for punishment. You have been quietly expecting to arrive one day like a debt finally called in. But stay with me, because the entire reason for this warning is not what you have assumed it to be. And if you leave now, you will spend the rest of your life afraid of a story that was never actually written the way you feared it was. Let me tell you about a man who spent 20 years running from a single night he could never forgive himself for. He was young when it happened, barely more than a boy really, and one impulsive, selfish choice cost someone he loved deeply, a kind of pain he could never take back. He told no one. He built an entire life on top of that silence, a good job, a respectable home, a family who admired him, and underneath all of it, every single day, a quiet, constant dread that one day the truth would surface and take everything away from him. He avoided anything that reminded him of that night. He flinched at certain names, certain dates, certain songs that happened to be playing in the background of ordinary moments. He believed, with complete certainty, that he was the kind of man who could never truly be forgiven, not by the person he had hurt, and certainly not by whatever higher power was keeping score of every mistake he had ever made. Then, on an ordinary evening exactly like this one, sitting alone with nothing but his own thoughts for company, he finally said the words out loud for the first time in 20 years, not to a courtroom, not to the person he had wronged, but simply into the silence of his own room, admitting the truth to himself, and to whatever was listening beyond himself. He expected to feel worse. He expected the confession to confirm every fear he had carried for 2 decades. Instead, for the first time since that night, he felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight for so long he had forgotten it was even possible to breathe without it. He described it later as the strangest kind of relief, the feeling of finally being seen completely, including the very worst part of himself, and discovering that being seen completely did not end in the punishment he had spent 20 years bracing for. It ended in something closer to being held. Before I tell you why this matters so much for your own life, I want you to notice something, because it will help you recognize whether this warning was written for you specifically. People who are quietly carrying something they have never fully released almost always share the same private symptoms, even if they have never connected the dots between them. You sleep, but you rarely wake up feeling rested, because some part of you is always half-braced for something you cannot name. You have grown unusually skilled at changing the subject the moment a conversation drifts too close to a certain memory, a certain name, a certain year of your life you have quietly decided not to revisit. You have felt a strange, sudden restlessness at random moments, driving home, lying in bed, standing in line somewhere ordinary. A feeling almost like being tapped on the shoulder by something you cannot see. You have had at least one dream in the last year that shook you awake and left you staring at the ceiling, unable to explain exactly why it unsettled you so deeply. And you have felt, more than once, a quiet sense that time is moving faster than it used to, that something is shifting, that a season of your life is ending whether you are ready for it or not. If even a few of these describe you, keep listening, because the rest of this warning was written for exactly the version of you that just recognized itself in those words. Sometimes this warning does not arrive only as a feeling. It arrives as a pattern, small and easy to dismiss on their own, but strange when you finally add them together. A song from a specific chapter of your life playing unexpectedly on the radio, the same week you had been thinking about the person from that chapter for the first time in years. A near miss on the road home that left your hands shaking on the steering wheel for reasons that had nothing to do with the actual danger and everything to do with a sudden, sharp awareness of how quickly everything could have ended differently. A conversation with a stranger that touched, almost impossibly, on the exact subject you had been avoiding in your own private thoughts for weeks. Most people notice these moments, feel a brief chill, and then move on with their evening as though nothing happened, filing it away as coincidence because coincidence is easier to live with than the alternative. But you already know, somewhere quiet inside yourself, that some of these moments have felt like more than coincidence, and the reason they have unsettled you is not because you are imagining things. It is because some part of you has always understood exactly what they were pointing toward. I am telling you this story because I need you to understand the actual nature of this warning before we go any further. Because right now you only know half of it, and the half you know is the half that has kept you afraid instead of free. But stay with me, because this is only the surface. What comes next is the part most people are never told, and it is the part that will change how you understand this entire message. The warning was never that you would be caught. The warning is that you are running out of time to stop carrying something you were never meant to carry alone for the rest of your life. This is the part almost nobody says clearly enough. The urgency in this message is real, but it was never about punishment arriving. It is about the slow, quiet cost of continuing to live inside a secret long after it should have been set down. Every year you carry it in silence is a year spent building distance between yourself and the people who love you, a year spent flinching at reminders you could have finally faced, a year spent performing a version of peace you do not actually feel. The true danger was never judgment falling on you from above. The true danger has always been the quiet erosion of the only life you have, spent defending a wall around a room you were never meant to seal shut forever. Think for a moment about what this has actually looked like in your own life, not in the abstract, but in specific, ordinary detail. It may have looked like avoiding a certain relative at family gatherings, because the last real conversation you had with them ended in words neither of you have taken back. It may have looked like the quiet resentment you have carried toward yourself for a promise you made and quietly broke, over and over, until you stopped believing your own word even in private. It may have looked like the version of yourself you present at work, at church, in front of your own children, so carefully polished that the gap between that version and the person you actually are late at night has become its own private exhaustion. None of these things are headline news. None of them would make anyone gasp if spoken aloud at a dinner table, but each of them has been quietly widening the distance between the life you are living and the life you are actually meant to live, one small, avoided truth at a time, and that distance, left unaddressed long enough, is the real danger this warning has always been pointing toward. Now, here is where it gets harder to hear. So take a breath, because what comes next is the part that will genuinely break your heart tonight, and I am not going to soften it, because you deserve the truth more than you deserve comfort right now. Some of you are not carrying a single dramatic secret. You are carrying 1,000 small ones, stacked so quietly on top of each other over so many ordinary days that you have almost stopped noticing the weight of them at all. The friend you stopped calling because reconciling felt harder than simply letting the relationship fade. The apology you have owed someone for years, rehearsed 100 times in your head, never once spoken out loud. The version of honesty you have avoided with the people closest to you because comfortable dishonesty felt safer than the risk of being fully known. None of these things made headlines. None of these things would shock anyone if they were said aloud at a dinner table. But you know, in the quiet part of yourself you visit only late at night, that each one of them has been slowly and steadily distancing you from the life you were actually meant to live, one small avoided truth at a time. Stay with me, because now we arrive at the truth this entire video was built around, the one the title promised you, and I am not going to make you wait any longer for it. The truth is this: you have not been given this warning because you are running out of chances. You have been given this warning because you are exactly out of excuses for waiting any longer. And there is an enormous difference between the two. A door that is closing is not the same as a door that is already closed. Tonight, right now, while you are still listening, the door is still open. The apology you have been avoiding can still be spoken. The truth you have been hiding can still be released from the tight grip you have kept it under for years. The person you have quietly wronged can still be reached, even if imperfectly, even if it feels far too late to matter. This is what breaks the heart the most, and also what heals it the deepest, if you let it. The warning was never a countdown to punishment. It was a countdown to a decision only you can make, and the good news, the news almost nobody frames this way, is that the deadline you have feared for so long has not actually passed yet. Now, I want you to think about something for a moment, because this next part is going to feel deeply personal, almost like I'm speaking directly about your own life. And that is because in some way I am. Somewhere in your life right now, there is a specific person you know you need to speak to honestly, a specific truth you have been avoiding saying to yourself in the mirror. A specific habit you have quietly known for a long time is quietly costing you the person you were meant to become. Do not look away from it while I say this. Do not distract yourself the way you usually do the moment something gets uncomfortably close to the truth. Sit with it for just a few seconds, because everything I am about to say next depends on you being honest with yourself right now, in this exact moment, before the ordinary noise of your life rushes back in and gives you permission to forget you ever heard this. Not everyone carrying this warning is hiding something dramatic. I think of a father who spent years quietly ashamed of something so ordinary that he almost never told anyone, because it seemed too small to matter next to the bigger failures other people confessed to. During the years his children were young, he had chosen work over presence more times than he could count, telling himself each time that it was temporary, that he would make it up to them later, that there would always be more birthdays, more weekends, more ordinary Tuesday evenings, to finally show up the way he meant to. His children grew up anyway, kind and successful and polite to him at family gatherings. But there was a certain careful distance in the way they spoke to him. A distance he pretended not to notice for years because noticing it would have required admitting what had caused it. One evening, watching his now-grown daughter gently redirect a conversation away from anything too personal. Exactly the way he used to redirect conversations with his own difficult father decades earlier. Something in him finally broke open. He called her that same night, not with excuses, but with a plain, overdue admission of what he now understood he had cost her. She cried on the phone for a long time. So did he. It did not erase 20 years of missed evenings, but it opened a door between them that had been quietly closing for a very long time. And in the years that followed, they built something neither of them had believed was still possible only one honest phone call earlier. Right now. Some of you watching this are telling yourselves that your situation is different, that what you did was worse or smaller, or simply too late to matter anymore. I want to speak directly to that thought, because it deserves an honest answer. It does not matter whether what you are carrying would sound dramatic, if said aloud at a dinner table, or barely worth mentioning at all. The weight of an unspoken truth has never been measured by how it would sound to strangers. It has only ever been measured by what it has quietly cost you to keep carrying it alone. And by that measure, every person watching this video tonight is carrying something worth finally setting down. Here is the second layer of this warning, and this one is harder to accept than the first. You already know what needs to change. The confusion you feel is not because the truth is unclear. It is because acting on it requires a kind of humility you have not yet decided to use. Nobody around you is going to force this decision on you, because it is far easier for the people who love you to quietly accept the version of you that avoids hard conversations than to challenge you toward the version of you still capable of real honesty. But deep inside, in the same quiet place where you have always known the truth about yourself, even when you have refused to say it out loud, you already know exactly what this warning is asking of you tonight. I know there is a version of you listening right now who believes their situation truly is the exception, not because you're being dramatic, but because you have replayed the details so many times that you have convinced yourself no ordinary explanation of grace could possibly stretch far enough to cover what you actually did. I want to be careful here, because I am not going to pretend that consequences do not exist, or that every action can be undone with a single phone call and a soft heart. Some harm cannot be fully repaired. Some relationships will not simply snap back into place the moment you finally speak the truth. But the warning tonight was never a promise that everything broken will be instantly fixed. It is a promise that you are not disqualified from beginning. However small that beginning looks, however far from finished it leaves things by morning. The line you have drawn in your own mind, the one that separates people who can still be forgiven from people who have gone too far to ever be forgiven, has never actually existed the way you have imagined it. You drew that line yourself, in the dark, alone, with nobody to argue against it, and you have been living inside it ever since, as though it were handed down from somewhere higher than your own fear. I want to tell you about a woman who almost let her own warning pass by unanswered, and then, by grace, did not. She had spent years estranged from her own father over a disagreement so old that neither of them could fully remember how it had started, only that neither one had been willing to be the first to reach out. She told herself there was still time. She told herself next year, next birthday, next holiday, always assuming the door would remain open indefinitely, the way doors always seem to when we are the ones standing comfortably on our side of them. One ordinary Tuesday afternoon, she felt an unusually strong urge to call him, a feeling she almost dismissed as inconvenient, arriving as it did in the middle of a busy day. She almost let it pass, the way she had let so many similar feelings pass before. But this time, for reasons she still cannot fully explain, she pulled her car over and made the call. They spoke for nearly 2 hours. Old wounds were not fully healed in that single conversation, but something essential shifted between them. A door that had been slowly rusting shut for years, suddenly creaking open again. 11 days later, her father passed away quietly in his sleep. She has said, many times since, that she does not know what would have become of her if she had let that particular Tuesday pass, the way she had let so many other Tuesdays pass before it. I am telling you this because somewhere in your life, tonight, there is a similar door still standing open, though you have no guarantee of how long it will remain that way. And the truth this warning is trying to hand you is that you do not need the perfect words prepared, and you do not need the other person to be ready to meet you halfway. You only need enough honesty to admit what you have been avoiding, and enough courage to take one small step toward it before you go to sleep tonight, while the door in front of you is still open. Now, stay with me just a little longer, because there is one more piece of this warning left, and this is the one that will stay with you the longest after this video ends. There is something else worth saying before we reach the final part of this warning, something that rarely gets said clearly enough in messages like this one. Setting down what you have been carrying does not usually happen the way it does in stories, in one dramatic, tearful, cinematic moment that resolves everything at once. More often it happens in stages, awkwardly, imperfectly, one uncomfortable conversation followed by weeks of uncertainty, followed by another small step forward, followed by moments where the old shame creeps back in and tries to convince you that you have not actually changed at all. This is normal. This does not mean the warning failed or that you did something wrong in how you responded to it. Grace was never a single moment that fixes everything permanently. It is a door that stays open, again and again, every single time you find the courage to walk back through it, even after you have stumbled, even after old patterns briefly return, even after you doubt whether any of this really changed anything at all. You have spent so much of your life believing that being fully known would mean being fully rejected, and this fear, more than almost anything else, has quietly shaped decisions you have never fully examined. You have hidden parts of yourself not because those parts were unforgivable, but because you were never given proof, until now, that being seen completely does not have to end the way you have always assumed it would. This is the deepest and most freeing part of tonight's warning. The full truth about you, every part you have hidden, every mistake you have buried, every silence you have kept, has never once disqualified you from being loved. It has only ever been waiting for you to stop hiding long enough to discover that. This is the final truth, and it is the one I want you to remember long after this video is over. The warning was never meant to frighten you into paralysis. It was meant to wake you gently before the quiet, comfortable delay of your ordinary days turned into years you did not mean to lose. What you did, whatever it was, however long you have carried it, however unforgivable it has felt in the privacy of your own mind at 3 in the morning, has already been seen in full. And rather than the ending you feared, what waits on the other side of finally setting it down is something closer to relief than ruin, something closer to being welcomed home than being cast out. So here's what I'm asking you to do tonight, before you close this video and return to your ordinary evening as though nothing happened. So here's what I'm asking you to do tonight, before you close this video and return to your ordinary evening as though nothing happened. If there is a specific person's name that came to mind while you were listening to this, do not let that be another coincidence you quietly dismiss by morning. Write their name down somewhere. You will actually see it tomorrow. If there is a truth you have been avoiding saying out loud, even to yourself, say it once, quietly, in the privacy of this exact moment, before the noise of your ordinary life rushes back in and gives you permission to forget you ever heard this. If there is a call you have been postponing for months or years under the comfortable excuse that there will always be more time later, decide right now, before this video ends, on one small, specific action you will take within the next 24 hours. Not someday, not eventually, but tomorrow, while the door in front of you is still standing open. None of this needs to be perfect. It does not need to resolve everything in a single conversation or repair years of distance in one attempt. It only needs to be honest, and it only needs to begin. Every meaningful reconciliation in history, every quiet redemption that ever actually happened, started exactly this way, with one imperfect, overdue, trembling first step taken by someone who had absolutely no guarantee of how it would be received, and took it anyway. Because the alternative, staying silent for one more year, had finally become harder to bear than the risk of speaking. Say the truth out loud, even if only to yourself at first, the one you have kept buried for years. Send the message you have been avoiding to the person you have quietly wronged or quietly missed. Make the call you have been postponing under the comfortable excuse that there will always be more time later, because tonight is the only night you have been given any guarantee of it all. It does not need to be a perfect conversation. It only needs to be an honest beginning, because that is how every quiet, buried truth in history has ever finally been set down. One uncomfortable, honest, overdue sentence at a time. I know what you did. I said it at the beginning of this video, and I'm saying it again now. But I want you to hear it completely differently this time than you did when this video started. I know what you did, and it was never the unforgivable thing you have spent years believing it was. I know what you did, and the door has not closed. I know what you did. And there is still time tonight, right now, in this exact moment, to finally set it down. What you choose to do with that truth next is entirely up to you, but the warning has been given, and it was never a threat. It was always, from the very first word, an invitation home.